What's going on, everyone? Bob over at RCautoworks.
Mishka Sidlin.
We're here for episode 2, and today we're going to be talking about dyno tuning. So the main goal in this episode is I kind of want to let people know more so what a dyno tune consists of. And before I forget, because I already forgot, I want to thank all our new subscribers, old subscribers, and anyone else that's just tuning in for the first time. Hopefully it's not your last time. As I said in many of my videos too, feel free to ask us questions. We're here to help you. That's the main goal of this channel, podcast, episodes, whatever you want to call it. We'll figure out a name there.
Yeah, and don't feel like an idiot because that's already my job. I don't know much about this stuff, not nearly as much as Bob, so don't feel bad. Any question is a good question.
I mean, if you knew more than me, then we would switch around. Yeah. So there you go. So, as I said, this episode we're going to be talking about dyno tuning. We're going to talk about some stuff that people don't know about. We got some stories to tell, and our first segment, which I'm going to let you lay into and read off.
Yeah. So, kind of dyno tuning, and I'd like to ask really different kinds of tuning, what there is, because in my own experience, I actually started out with an e-tune, which I didn't even know was a thing until I read about it, and it, I don't know, I didn't really like my experience as much as going to a dyno and like having you actually do it in person. So if you could kind of explain the differences and the advantages or disadvantages to both of those.
Yeah, most definitely. So, you guys are dyno tuning, which you can call it a chassis dyno, where you load the car onto the actual chassis. You have other dynos where you take off the wheels. Those are hub dynos. You have your engine dyno, where you're just dynoing the engine itself. You have, there's another one too that I'm slipping off the top of my head, I believe. But the other thing that I was going into, what I think you were more so talking about, was going to be the types of tunes. And, the types of tunes would be an e-tune, as you said, which I believe it stands for electronic tuning. I don't know if there's actually like a name for that. But e-tuning is where, and we do e-tuning, I do e-tuning here. I can do it for you. If you have a shop, if you got a business and you're looking to make some more money and have a private tuner, reach out to me. Anyways, e-tuning basically consists of where you purchase the tune, I send you the info that I need you to fill out. So what size is your engine? What do you have done to it? Internals? What injectors are you running? You fill out the paperwork, and don't be scared. If people are scared of paperwork, it's simple. It's simple questions, and if you are confused by anything, ask. We're here to help. You send me that info back. I send you a tune with the instructions on what to do. So my instructions usually will read like this. If your car is all motor, you're going to get me a cold start. So you're going to start your vehicle from cold, and you're going to let it fully warm up, and that's a data log. That's what I need. You send me that. Then we start with partial throttle tuning, and we crawl before we crawl before we walk, is the saying. And I send you revisions. You send me more data logs. We go back and forth. It could be 5, 7 times, 10 times, however many it takes to get the tune 100%. Because some guys will ask that too. Well, how many revisions do I get? I don't have a limit here. Biggest thing is we want to make sure your car is set up on your end, because we can't see the car. Which is the dyno checklist, but we'll talk about that later. Now, I will say the other tunes that I have heard, one would be, I've heard them called can tunes. I believe specifically what those are is somebody's getting a tune sent to them, but they're not getting any revisions. They're not getting updates. I almost call that a base map in a sense, a custom base map, where guys will contact me and say, hey, I built such and such setup. I need to get it started. I'm all the way on the other side of the world, so I need to bring it to a tuner, and then I'll make you a base map to get your car running. Some will come with revisions, maybe 1 or 2 to get it 100% to where we want it to be. And then you go off to your tuner or wherever you're doing, and then you get tuned that way. And then, of course, the dyno tuning aspect, which I touched about, where somebody would walk in.
Is that safe when just running like say somebody just wanted to kind of cut corners, they say, just let me get a base map. And I want to run it for like a week or a month before I get it tuned. Is that safe, or is that not really?
So yes and no. But that is one of the, that's a good question. That is one of the big problems that we see is we sell base maps, and we specifically tell these people, hey man, this base map is for you to start the car, run it, check all your fluids, check for leaks, but get it to the dyno ASAP. That doesn't mean as soon as you shut the car off, you need to run to a dyno tuner, but that means you shouldn't be driving on it long term. You shouldn't be driving on it for months. You should definitely not be beating on it. You know, and we see this stuff too. We're not idiots here. We also know when guys pay for something and then we don't hear from them like for 3 or 4 months, and then they come back into play, and usually at that time they have an issue.
Yeah.
You know, hey, my car's not running right, and it's like, well, you paid for a base map 3 months ago. Did you ever get fully tuned? No, I didn't. And then, you know, we hear the reasonings. I don't want to say excuses. You know, people have their reasonings. I understand that. But, you know, as far as safety goes, I will add, I've had guys that once you pay for a dyno tune with me, I will send you a dyno tune and I'll recalibrate it with the revisions and all that stuff. I have guys drive down on one of those maps 8 hours away, 10 hours away, 12 hours away with specific instructions, and they get here, we put it on the dyno after it cools down, and we're good to go.
By instructions, do you mean like don't go over X amount of RPM or speed or whatever?
That's exactly it. Okay. You know, some guys have larger setups. Larger setups usually consist of more heat in the engine bay. We're talking about big turbo setups. At that point, I even have instructions where I'll tell people, hey, after 2 hours of driving, take a break, let the car sit, let it cool down, open up the hood, check this and check that. You know, because my biggest thing is not even after, you know, yes, your car's not here, and yes, it's not in my possession and I can but I still care. You know, so I don't want to see anything happen when you're coming here, or if you buy that base map, you know, it's not like we're giving you a warning like, hey man, you need to come here immediately and get tuned. It's not about that. It's more so the safety of your setup. You know, you spent a lot of money on something. You're at the very end. You know, the dyno tuning should be the very end of your project. And I think too, that's where a lot of guys, they get to that point and either they can't afford it or they think that a dyno tune's not a big deal for whatever reason. You know, maybe their buddy tuned their own car somewhere and, you know, whatever. I don't know. But, you know, it's little warnings like that, little tips, suggestion, and some stuff that guys don't ever think about. You know, after you drive for an hour and a half to 2 hours, when you pop that hood, put the key on, turn on the heat too. Try to cool that thing down as quick as you can, because we do have guys that will make that trip and they make it all in one day. You know, no sleep. They'll actually drop the car off. We've had guys drop the car off. They'll go take a nap at a hotel, and then they'll come back at like 4 or 5, depending when they got here, and then they make the drive home. Wow. My anxiety would be through the roof. Yeah. You know, but, you know, and then at that point too, we do a follow-up, and I'm always worried that they get home. You know, hey, anything go wrong? It's you know, it's a long drive. It could be at times for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that I've always kind of suggested to people when they're modifying their car is, if you're gonna add a part, and obviously you can add way more to this, but I always say, like, if you're gonna buy a part, add a part, bolt something on, more than likely you're gonna need a tune to actually see the power difference. And I don't know how safe it would be if you didn't get it, but like that's kind of something, like you mentioned about price. Yeah. That's something that I always factored in, was like, if I'm gonna buy this, well, yes, I'm gonna make sure that I am gonna save enough also for the tune. Mm-hmm. And then if I'm gonna buy this, and you know, these 2 other parts might be complementary, I might just wanna do it all at the same time so that I just pay for the tune at one time, rather than retuning after every single part. Yep. Are there specific parts that are okay to not tune with? Yeah, no, so skip the tune? That's a good question. And we're gonna use the 9th gen Civic as a great example. The best gen, by the way. I was gonna say. The 9th gen Civic, you got your 3 major bolt-ons, almost on any car. You know, this goes back, we were talking about in episode 1, the message boards. Intake, header, exhaust, IHE. That was back in the day. Hey, I had IHE done, what else can I do? The 9th gen group, you can't do a colder intake because it changes where the MAF sits, and you need a tune for that. Yep. Now, here's the other thing, that there's so much misinformation out there, and I read it and I don't even respond anymore because I don't. Why argue with somebody that acts like they know it all?
Guys with 9th Gen Civics, they think that if you have a downpipe, you need to get tuned, and you don't.
Really?
Yeah, you really don't. So, I got into it not too long. This was probably actually 4 years ago, where a guy wanted to argue with me, and I'm not even joking. When he was arguing with me, I was literally sitting in a 9th Gen Civic tuning it. So with the downpipe, when you put that on, the computer's going to know that you're flowing more exhaust out, and it's going to compensate.
Really?
It's going to compensate in the tune for air fuels we're speaking about, and it's going to change what it needs to change. That's going to be your short-term fuel trim and your long-term. So if you've heard me talk about closed loop stuff before, that's what short-term and long-term is, and that's the computer making the adjustments. Now, you'll hear from time every now and then, so the guys that are already trying to get down my throat, hold on one second, let me finish. Every now and then you'll hear a guy, well, I put a downpipe on and I'm throwing a code, I don't know the code off the top of my head, but it's a too lean code or a too rich code. Usually it's too lean because you're flowing more exhaust, so you need a little bit more fuel. So now what your computer is doing is it sees you need more fuel, so it's compensating for it. Newer cars, the computers ain't stupid. So it's compensating for the fueling. It's saying, okay, we need 10% of more fuel now to get to the desired air fuel we want to hit. Well, once you get to a point where it's throwing too much fuel for an extended amount of time, that's when you get a too lean code. So the question, if somebody said, hey, if I get a downpipe on a 9th Gen Civic, do I need a tune? No, not necessarily. What the tune ultimately is going to do, though, it's going to open that power up. So if you do an intake, and let's just say you do a short ram, I don't want to use short ram intake. You shouldn't be putting a short ram intake on your car.
No.
I've done some tests on this too in the 9th Gen groups, and we'll provide the link. The short ram intake is actually worse than the stock intake.
That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you got a stock airbox, but you made it bigger, and you got a header or a downpipe, I should say. And you got an exhaust system. Your car might run fine, but in order to achieve more power, that's when the tune comes into place. That's when somebody like myself can go in there, find out what the car likes, and ultimately that's how you make more power. So some stuff you don't, some stuff you 100% do because the car's not going to run right. And even too, you do a lightweight flywheel on these cars, not necessarily to a point where you need a tune from the lightweight flywheel to make more power, but you have to turn off certain sensors. And at that point, you have to put some type of tune on there. So instead of just putting a base map tune on there, which if it's a base map supplied from a company, not from a tuner, but if it's a base map supplied from a company, such let's say Honda or K-Tuner, those shouldn't be driven on long term. There's a big difference between a customized base map from a tuner like myself, especially if I'm doing revisions, and a set base map that is just supposed to start your car and you're not supposed to drive on it.
Wow, that's major, because I remember looking at the different, package tunes or whatever, and people even mentioning like, no, my car runs great on that, and I'm like, are you sure though? I mean, should you be?
Well, and that's the big thing too. What a lot of guys don't understand is, so keep this in mind. You're spending more money to add performance, yet if you don't get a tune at the end of the day, either you're not gaining performance or you can actually lose performance.
Wow.
So some of these base maps early on in the days of me doing the YouTube stuff, I would show people the difference between a tune that I did and a base map from Honda, and we're talking about like a 15 to 20 horsepower difference in certain areas in the power band. And when I say power band, that's not the peak horsepower number, but the power band is what you're going to actually feel.
Yeah.
Usually it's around VTEC too. VTEC with the base maps are usually not set where they're supposed to sit, or people will go in there and change them. We just did the whole thing on Mythbusters, so that's a good one too.
Yeah,
if you think VTEC, because it hits harder, it sounds louder, you're making more power, it's the opposite. When VTEC is smooth and engaging like you can't almost even tell, that's when you're going to be optimizing the power, because when it hits super hard, well, you're not making the power down low until VTEC kicks in. So there's a lot of extra horsepower that can be gained, even on a car that is fairly stock. Because let's face it too, cars from the factory are detuned. They have to take into consideration that it's not a full-out race car. They also have other stuff to take into consideration with how the whole computer system operates.
Yeah, and I've heard, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that a lot of motors can be different, like just completely stock from different car to different car.
Oh, yeah.
Like one can make more power, you can get a slightly more overpowered engine than another one.
Yeah.
And that's why the tune would be, the custom tune would be such a big deal, right?
Well, that's the thing too. So, you get some freak motors that are, you put them on the dyno and they make the power that they should and then some. We call those motors, those are the motors that are built on a Friday. They were putting them together, they were in a good mood, they got that thing, they got that thing perfect. Some other motors, and these are even for newer cars, some newer engines and whatnot, guys will complain, hey, it smokes a little bit and it seems a little sluggish. Those were built on a Monday.
Yeah.
They don't want to be there working and stuff like that.
The hangover motors.
Yeah, but even too, we get a lot of guys, and this is a big thing too, guys will think that if I tune their car, that they can put that tune on their buddy's car and it's going to work the same just because it's the same setup.
Yeah.
There's so much that comes into play.
Wow.
And it's not even the engine too. You have to take in consideration, we have some guys where the cars don't even want to roll in general. Like we have to, if we push cars around here, you got a caliper that's seized up a little bit, that's causing a little bit of a drag. You have this, your drivetrain, you're losing stuff. There's so much that comes into it. So just because your buddy has the same setup doesn't necessarily mean that a tune from his would work the setup the same on yours. And don't get me wrong, I get it. I understand, a dyno tune it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but you're paying for the reassurance of your setup being good. I mean, I don't want to say it's the foundation because it's the last thing you're doing.
Yeah.
So, it's the opposite of that, but it's the thing that completes the whole package. It's
the icing on the cake.
That's exactly it.
Can we talk a little bit, I mean, you mentioned the different dyno types.
Yes.
And I've always kind of wondered the difference between those, like the ones, how you mentioned, like the hub dynos.
Yes.
Look very different compared to what you've got here.
Yes.
Can you mention a little bit about the differences between those specifically, and then also what you use here?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that comes into play is ultimately going to be who's making the dyno. So, DynoJet doesn't have any hub dynos, as opposed to Mainline Dyno is a big company. They only sell hub dynos. The biggest dip, besides, I mean, you are comparing apples to oranges, so we're not saying that the only difference is how they mount the car on the actual dyno.
Yeah.
A hub dyno, I don't want to say it's a little safer, because I've never had a car fly off the dyno. How I strap it down, if you actually watch some of my videos, I actually still find this kind of crazy. DynoJet recommends you strapping it down by using 4 straps. Now, I said 4 straps. Go look at how I set up my cars. There's 4 straps. Go look at any other guy that's tuning. They're only using 2 straps. So, the whole thing is if a strap fails, you want to have a backup strap.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing between those dynos, the hub dyno, I would say, besides going into crazy detail, is going to be like a safety aspect. But I don't want to say that and have people scared that a car is going to fly off a dyno.
Yeah.
Can it happen? Yes. If you take the precautions, you got to be safe about it. No matter how many cars you tune, the minute you take it easy and you turn your back on safety, that's when stuff happens. I mean, I've been doing this for a while and I still have the same policies. I still have, when I'm on the dyno, nobody's around it until the very end when you can do videos and the tune's already pretty much done. I'm focusing on your car and the tune 100%. I can't focus on you near the dyno possibly getting too close, or God forbid, what if something were to let go and it flies off and kills you? Yeah. So I do let people in the back take video at the very end. That's the fun part. And then the other dyno too I'll just mention is a Dyno Dynamics. DynoJet uses 1 roller. Dyno Dynamics actually uses 2 rollers, so the tire almost sits inside the 2 rollers. Once again, it's kind of...
oh, I see.
Yeah, the big difference would just be like safety.
Okay.
We actually contacted a company that does educational teaching, and they were looking to host a dyno session, a teaching class, whatever you want to call it. And I said, hey, we got a dyno. We can house 50 to 100 people here, no problem. We met all these requirements. And then they said, we don't use a dyno jet because of safety. I didn't argue with them. I got it. I understood it. But at the same time, these dynos can be just as safe.
Yeah, and you've got certain checklists that you run through, right? And
yes,
and that's huge what you said. You've got to be on it every single time, because it's when you start to get more laps is when you can actually mess up. So.
And that's the thing too. If I'm feeling sick to a certain day, and some guys will still try to push me to tune. And hey, my setup's not that big. Can you maybe just push through it? You have to remember, not only mentally I have to be there and focusing on your car, but I have to focus on a lot of other stuff. I constantly am getting out of the car and checking stuff. I'm checking the straps. I'm going over if I can get a hole into the spark plugs, I'm looking at the spark plugs. There's so much stuff that's involved in it where I do have, I know what I can do, what I'm capable of. And, there's certain times where I'll get a cold and I feel great. And then there's certain times where a little cold will knock me down. I can't focus and I can't be on the dyno. I may be here in a sense, but I know not to get on that dyno.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, knowing.
That makes sense. And that's kind of says a lot about how you work and the standard of quality that you have for yourself. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, too, if people want to get upset because of my health, this winter has really not only kicked my butt, it's kicked a lot of other people's butts, including my children. If people don't understand that, I do apologize, but at the same time, I'll be the first one to give you your money right back and say, here, you can go elsewhere. It's not like I'm at home just with my feet up on the chair.
Yeah.
I love to work. People that know me know that I love to be here, and there's times where I'll show up kind of not feeling well, and they'll look at me and they'll be like, hey, dude, go home. Why are you here? And it's, you're...
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if you take any days off.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to that point where...
You'll hit me up on a Sunday, you're like, I'm in the shop. I'm like, oh, wow, on a Sunday, that's crazy.
You love what you do and you're passionate about it, man. I can live here in a sense.
That's awesome.
What else we got?
I don't know if this is something that you want to answer, but I figured it was a little spicy question.
Okay.
That the people might want to know. It might be a two-parter. So what is, again, you don't have to share this if you don't want to, but what is the highest horsepower you have tuned, like seen on your graph?
Okay.
And what's the max that your dyno can take?
So the dyno can take, and it's the software, I believe. Like you can upgrade packages.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so you can update that. Off the top of my head, I may be incorrect on that, but I believe this dyno is rated for 2,000 horsepower.
Wow.
We have seen cars with 1,000 horsepower on here.
Damn.
The big problem with that is just how you have to load them and strap them down.
Yeah.
Those cars, it's an insane amount of power. We've gotten a lot of Hondas at like 800 horsepower, 900 horsepower. Once you go over the 800 horsepower, that's when you start really, really fighting big issues with these types of dynos. As I was saying, that there's a benefit of a hub dyno. You don't have traction issues on the dyno.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's just something. And if anybody wants to buy me a hub dyno, by all means, let's start a GoFundMe, man. They're not cheap. This dyno behind us wasn't cheap. But yeah, so I would say, we've seen a couple 1,000 horsepower cars on here.
That's awesome.
That's the other thing too. I don't think a lot of people realize how quick the dyno run is over and what just happened.
Now, Now, what's the difference? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of differences, but as far as when you're dyno tuning, say a 400 horsepower car and an 800 horsepower car, I assume that maybe in one of them you'll be in a different gear for traction purposes, or is that a thing, or?
Not necessarily. The main thing, there's a couple things that play the factor. You want to be in a 1-to-1 gear ratio. So basically, on cars, it's usually third or fourth gear.
Okay.
What that basically is doing is you're eliminating any load that is going through the transmission because you're on a 1-to-1 gear. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, though, is on some specific cars, if I'm in that gear, and I mention this because I've had some people every now and then comment, you're in the wrong gear. You're not necessarily wrong, but if I was in that correct gear, we would probably be doing about 150 on the dyno, which on a stationary piece, 150 miles per hour, anything that can go wrong if it were to happen, you're not talking about
catastrophic. I mean.
Yeah, and you're also talking about the dyno then has to stop, which this dyno doesn't stop instantly. You're talking about like what just happened. Let's just say, you know, God forbid a tire were to come off. I mean, that's going to play ping pong in the shop. You know, so there's times where the gear will change in a sense. You know, and then there's other cars too, the gears are so long in that gear or whatever it is, it's not that you're going super fast. Well, you still are, you're doing about 120, but some of these cars, you know, and a lot of people don't realize this too, some of these cars, when you're, especially front wheel drive cars, you're holding on for dear life on the steering wheel. If you let go, it's gonna pull the car off. So one hand, you're trying to hold on, you're trying to tune, you're trying to do the brake on the dyno. So it's a lot of it is like muscle memory.
Wow.
It's actually funny because we had a guy next door, he wanted to put his car on the dyno. I said, sure, not a big deal. Now I prepped him how to use the dyno. I talked to him, this is the brake, you press this button. This is the green button means you start the run. You hold onto the wheel, you do all that stuff. He blinked out. He blinked out. We got him to get rolling. It was a very rough start. You know, he was jerking, he was doing this, and I'm telling him, hey, now let off the clutch, man. You know how to drive clutch, but you forgot. So, and I'm standing by the passenger door, or I was in the passenger seat, and he's in the driver's seat, and I'm telling him, I'm like, okay, well now you're in first gear, shift to second. And I mean, it was like he never knew how to shift. Like, boom, banging the gears. Okay, now get to third. And we're in third by that time, and I'm like, okay, just get on it a little bit. And you know, once he really smashes it too, the wheel wants to turn. So he's holding on, and I'm watching him, and I'm like, okay, now press the brake. You know, press the brake. You never press the brake on a car either.
Really?
The car is not going to stop the dyno. The dyno drum itself weighs about 6,000 pounds.
Wow, I had no idea.
Roughly, yeah. We know that because we had to move this thing when we moved into the bigger shop, and I had to buy a forklift, which was rated for 6,000 pounds. It moved it, but it did a lot better moving it if you pushed it, kind of. But going back, he was, you know, he did the run, we got through it, and he looked at me and he's like, how do you do this every day? And I'm like, dude, a lot of it comes into play, muscle memory. Mm-hmm. There's specific times, if you ever get to see when I'm inside of a car, when I'm tuning it, usually I hang the controller on the mirror. I've tried before where I'll hold it, or I'm sorry, it's always in my hand, but it always usually hangs down from a mirror. I've tried before where I set it up differently, and those are the times when I need to go reach for it immediately. I don't know where it's at. Oh. I'm feeling for it, you blank out. So a lot of the dyno process is muscle memory. As far as the tuning goes, you know, that's the whole thing itself in general. I will add, we are a shop, so if you hear some cars next door being started, forgot to make mention on that. I did tell everyone to be quiet, but they do got to move some cars around. So we are a full working automotive shop.
It's cool car sounds. So
yeah, there you
they'll
go.
Get over it.
There you go. What else we got?
So we were talking about your setup. Oh, this is just a random question about tuning.
Sure.
I've seen where people will say they go out to the drag strip.
Yes.
And they're maybe a more high profile race or something like that, mm-hmm. but they actually bring their tuner with them.
Yes.
Like, how does that work? Are you able to make adjustments?
Oh yeah.
Like on the fly like that? And what is the difference between doing that and like how big of an adjustment are they making first of all?
Yeah.
And what's the difference between doing that like on a dyno?
So I do offer trackside tuning. That's a free little shout out to myself. You got your two cars, we could break it down. You have your cars that are, let's just say a 400 horsepower Civic. When I go to the track with them, I'm more so trying to help them set up their launch. And then I'm looking at the time slips and seeing what we can do better to increase the time, to get a better time. Now you have your really, really big cars, you know, those 800 horsepower cars. And not a lot of people realize this. Those cars are really never fully dialed in a sense, on the dyno. You dial them into a point, and then you go to the track, and you do all your other testing where you get everything figured out. So the guys that know their stuff, when you see them on a laptop, they're doing something. Now the other guys that bought a laptop and they have no clue what they're doing and they're looking cool, that's a whole different story. But you're constantly making track changes. You're depending on when you're launching the thing, depending on how you're shifting, anti-lag, all that stuff comes into play, and that's ultimately what the track is for. Most cars, though, like I said, if you're under 700 horsepower, the dyno is going to be fine. But at the same time, what I actually started doing last year, any clients of mine that went to the track, they had my personal cell phone number. They would let me know when they were going to the track, and we would be in the loop.
Awesome.
I had one guy last year, I think it was his first time ever on slicks. So I said, hey, don't get scared. Don't drop the clutch though, preload it. And he had a decent time. I looked at the time slip and I knew where we can gain. So I said, okay, I'm gonna lower the launch down a little bit because you're spinning. Let's see how that does. He came back and he said, man, that, not only did he say it was a lot better, we had a time slip that improved. So, let's lower it a little bit more. Let's see if we can get that slip, the 60 foot a little bit better. And then he would come back and be like, either texting or phone calling, hey, I'm bogging down a little bit. Okay, well, we got our sweet spot for the day. And a lot of people don't realize this too, man. A lot of stuff changes with the weather. Hotter days, you're gonna have less traction. If it's a super cold day, track prep. So, a lot of that stuff comes into play. And for my clients, I really like to make myself available. People have my cell phone number. And I tell people right off the bat too, just don't abuse it. If you got to start off a message when you're not at the track and it's like Christmas morning and you start off a message with, hey man, I hate to bug you, you're probably bugging somebody. So at the same time, most guys usually respect that.
Yeah. That's awesome though. I didn't know that you did like the trackside tuning.
Oh yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. And I will say, besides, people do have to pay for that. Depending on where you're getting me and shipping me out to, not shipping literally, I do charge sometimes for, plane tickets and, even room expenses. It really just depends on how long I'm going to be out there.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, especially if you're going out to like out of state or something like that.
Yep.
About how long does it take you to prep your dyno for a tune? Like say they come in, they sign the dyno waiver or whatever you got.
Yeah.
How long from there to actually getting started on the tune? And then how long does the tune take, from start to finish?
So every car is going to be a little bit different. Of course, bigger caliper cars are going to require a little bit longer on the dyno. That only makes sense. A typical tune can be anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. What you have to take in consideration too, if any little minor hiccup comes up, I'm trying to diagnose it in the time that I have allowed. Not a lot of people realize too, when you're paying for the dyno tune, you're actually paying for a time slot more so. So as much as I would love to keep a car on for 2 days if it was having a problem, well, I can't, it'd be a business. I would go under sooner or later. To strap down the car, I do a prelim check where I go over, I not only do we have a dyno checklist, which we'll throw in comments, I go over that checklist in my brain. So I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, and if I see anything, I'm gonna take my camera out and I'm gonna document it, and we're gonna tell the customer. If it's a big enough problem, then we won't go through with the tune. And if it's a problem that, hey, you should really address this later on, well, now the customer knows it and they got some free diagnostic out of it. I mean, it's the best of both worlds. The preliminary stuff is about 25 minutes, give or take.
Okay.
Depending on the setup. And then I would say from the time you get here, if everything is going smooth and I'm doing everything and I don't have a bathroom break or anything, it only takes about 25, 30 minutes to set it up on the dyno and get going. And then, like I said, that you equate that to about 3 to 4 hours roughly, give or take. Bigger setups, 4 or 5 hours.
Wow, man, that's a whole process. That's crazy.
Well, the other thing too, and we hear from time and time again, hey, can I hang around? And you can hang around here, and then they'll follow up with, well, it's only gonna take like an hour, right? And I will say though, a lot of that is because they went elsewhere and it only took them an hour. But they also, what was that?
That's wild. Well, if something takes you a quarter of the amount of time that it should take, I mean, that's...
Well, usually what happens is hey, I went elsewhere and it only took an hour. Okay, why are you coming here? Well, I'm having a problem with something. That's because that part of the tune wasn't focused on. When it comes to tuning, you have a lot of stuff. What a lot of guys just see on the dyno videos are wide open throttle pulls. you have so much more than that. You have, you know, your cold start, your idle, you have your partial throttle stuff, which that is where a lot of guys don't, let me rephrase that. A lot of tuners, they don't care about the partial throttle. They're in there for the peak horsepower number. They do a wide open throttle pull, they print it. So you might have been somewhere, or you might have had a buddy go somewhere and made some decent numbers, but the car literally drove like poop. That's because they didn't look at the other areas. And I have actually, during these whole Mythbuster stuff that we started, I've had at least a handful of guys reach out, not only with that problem, I've had 2, which we can do another episode on it. I've had 2 guys share their tunes, and I've literally called them up and said, hey, you know your car's not tuned. You know your wide open throttle.
Wow.
Yeah, and dude, it's that bad. And I'm gonna say this too, from a person that does the tuning, from a tuner standpoint, I don't know how people let that go and they try to put their name on that stuff. It is unreal. And you know, I talked a little bit about in the fuel injector Mythbusters video. I don't think a lot of people care about their name and their reputation. And
they just want to make that money.
They want to make a quick buck. They want to put it in their pocket, and then a year or two when they can't get any more customers, and they don't know why, well, let's just change our name to another. You know, I hear that a lot too. Well, such and such is an awesome tuner, but he went out of business. And such is an awesome tuner, but he used to tune here, and now he went elsewhere, and now he's over here. So then you got to ask yourself, if that guy was doing such a good job, well, number one, why did he stay in business? And let's give the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say he didn't have what it takes to run a business, because it's a lot. Mm-hmm. But why are you jumping from shop to shop to shop? If you were that valuable, that first shop would have kept you. Yeah. The second shop would have kept you. I know some tuners that have been in like 4 or 5 different shops within like a couple of years. Wow. And let me say this too. I don't care about anybody else. I'm not bashing anybody else. But when it comes to reputation and your name, and you can probably hear me how I picked up my voice a little bit and I'm a little bit more vocal. I'm very passionate, not about what I do ultimately. I'm very passionate too about my name. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really not even in this industry. I think as a whole, in general in life, I think that has just gone downhill. You know?
I mean, well, that's how you have, gotten this far with your shop. You went from a little garage to having this nice big shop with a bunch of lifts and a dyno and all that. I mean, that's how you get there, is by standing by your word, standing by your name, doing high quality work, having people come back, getting referrals. I mean, a lot of people that are just chasing that money, they don't understand that it's way more than just charging people.
Exactly.
Like, the work is just like the most important part.
And I don't think they see the long term. I think they're in it for the quick buck. They don't care about the if you think about it too, excuse me, it's common sense, but the better work you do, the longer you're going to be in business and the more customers you're going to get, but people don't see that. And there's times where I have to go the extra mile and, hey, we'll get your car back on and, we'll help you out, or we'll do this or that. Like I feel for people. Like I have a heart. I can't, help everybody in a sense. That's the other thing too, that these videos are kind of opening up. A lot of guys are emailing me and they're looking for, I don't want to say free tunes, but they're looking for, hey, can you fix my tune? I have no money. I've gotten the emails.
Well, cars, I will say, cars are not something that you get into if you're struggling with cash. That's that's something that you put aside, work on your money, and then once you're good again, then you can, focus on your cars.
And that's one of the big things too we tell people. Like, hey, if you don't have the money for this, then maybe you should have I don't want to say you not having money affects me in a sense, because ultimately it doesn't, but maybe you should have planned out a little bit better. Yeah. Money management. But going off of, back to what it took to get here and do all that stuff, I don't think a lot of people realize, like, this is an ongoing thing. We're already looking, we're in 2024, we're already looking into 2025, what we can do better in 2025 even. We have 2024 planned out, but it's a constant thing. Like, and, maybe it's because of my mindset. Maybe my mindset is constantly wanting to do better every day when I come in here. I'm trying to constantly learn. maybe it's because of the mindset. I don't know. Maybe it's the mentality. Maybe it's how I was raised.
I think it is, man. It plays big into that, you know?
I was going to say, maybe it goes all hand in hand. I remember when I first got into this industry too, my dad specifically said, do something a little bit different just to make sure you stand out. And at that time, you know, it was all maintenance stuff. And he's like, you know, vacuum out a customer's car. If it's dirty, why don't you wash it? You know, you go the extra mile. People are going to remember that. And at the end of the day, you know, that's what it's been for the last 24 odd years, months, or whatever you want to count. And, you know, I lead by example. So everybody else that works here too knows that. And it's always about going the extra mile.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
What else we got? I see we got some tips for preparing a vehicle for the dyno tune.
Yeah, I think we kind of, well, you said we're going to have the checklist on there. Yeah,
the checklist. So if we can get into that, and you know, we have a dyno checklist. We actually have a video that I did with Steve before I had my new co-host. The dyno checklist is there to help you. It's actually a link in the YouTube video. Anybody can click it. You don't even have to come here. You can be on the other side of the world. That is going to help you. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, or a lot of my videos, I should say, there's helpful stuff involved where if people actually took the time, and I had this, I think, last month or a month and a half ago, we had a guy come in and it was a boosted setup. And I said, did you boost leak it? And he said, no, but I took it on the street and I did a pull and we built boost. And I kid you not, I looked at him and I said, you don't watch any of my videos, do you? And he's like, no, I didn't, you know. And the biggest thing is a lot of this stuff, a lot of problems that guys have on the dyno, I've discussed and talked about.
Yeah.
That's what the dyno checklist there is for too. And I will say this, if you ask us for a dyno checklist, we can email it to you. If you're listening or you're watching this and it's easier, email us. We'll email you one. We'll send something out, and then it's about 4 pages long. Within 20 seconds, okay, I looked it all over, I'm ready to schedule a tune. And it's like, no, you didn't, man. Like, come on. And those are the guys, too, that will show up. You know, Hondas are 4-lug usually. They only have 2 lugs on their wheels.
Oh, no.
They only have, you know, they have 4 lugs, but the car's leaking fluid. And it's like, you know, a lot of people are under the false assumption that if a car is driving on the street, it is ready for the dyno. And that's the big thing, too, with maintenance. Just because your car is driving and just because it's been good, if you're running a 20-year-old distributor cap, you should change it before it goes on the dyno. If you're running 20-year-old spark plug wires, you should change it. I don't care if your car is running good on the street. The dyno, we're going to be taking your car to the top. We're looking for the top performance out of it. We want everything to perform at the highest that it should perform. That means the ignition, the spark. That means the fuel. You got an old fuel filter, replace it. I've actually had a guy not too long ago, he bought a used fuel pump and he reused the sock for whatever reason. I guess he said the new sock didn't fit. The fuel filter sock looked like it was 30 years old. And he was having a fueling issue that we were trying to figure out. So you pile stuff like that on top of it. As I've been saying lately, not just in this industry, you stack your cards in your favor. You know, you want to have a successful tuning a successful dyno tune outing, you stack your cards in your favor. You know, does that mean you have to rebuild your whole engine? No. If you're dripping a little bit of oil, am I okay with that? Yeah, sure. I'm not looking to eat off the ground after your car is done on the dyno. I get it. I understand the stuff. But at the
same time, I mean, not setting yourself up and not being prepared for that, not going through that full checklist, that could potentially cost you a lot more money, right? I mean, because like you said, you're paying for the time.
Yep.
And that scheduled time, and if your car breaks down on the dyno, can't even finish your tune, you already paid for the time, you know?
Yeah, and that's where a lot of guys don't understand that you're paying for the time slot. You're paying, I set that time aside for your car. So if your car is on the dyno for an hour and I have to stop and pull it off because there's an issue, you're still paying for that whole dyno time because those extra 3 hours I set aside, now I have to go find something else to do, or, which is fine, I got plenty of work, or the guy that I could have tuned that day, maybe on top of it, I lost that business.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
you know, there's that. It's not that dyno tuners are out to get every single person. Some tuners are, don't get me wrong. If you watch my videos and you think I'm that type of person, I don't want you coming here, honestly. You know, that might sound weird, but I don't run my business like that. I want you to be I want you to have the most successful chance of getting on this dyno and at the end of the day being good. Because ultimately, too, my customers are going to be a lot more happy if your car is decent. And that's just going off of, too. I think some guys kind of think, you know, I think they purposely did this. No, not at all. I have enough business right now that I can stop taking in customers probably and be happy for another 2 or 3 years where I'll constantly be busy. It's not about trying to get the most amount of money out of a customer. We want the success rate to be high. We want customers to understand where we're coming from, because every now and then, too, we get a customer that doesn't fully understand. He, you know, will call me some certain names, and it's like, hey, man, I hate to break it to you, but that's just how the real world works. And as I said before, if I can keep your car in the dyno for 4 days in a row because, you know, the first day you had a massive oil leak that happened, the second day your tire that is barely hanging on by you know, it's from, you know, 10 years old and it's dry rotted, well, that exploded. You can't do it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is as much as I love doing this, it is a business. And that's the thing, too. I've told myself this very early on, that yes, it's a business. Yes, I love helping people. But if I wasn't making money and it wasn't successful, I would much rather be at home with my kids and my family.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what it goes to. I mean, that's, you know, my biggest thing that keeps me away from here on Sundays is my family. I love being with my family. You know, if they took a whole week vacation without me, I would be here nonstop. I would be living here. You know, as you get older, certain holidays don't mean as much in a sense. I would be here working on all those holidays. But yeah.
No, that's awesome. Let's see what else we got.
Anything else?
Oh, random question.
Sure.
Do you have a preference, or is there a specific type of car that you like to tune more? Is there a difference in that?
No, not at all. I will say with this point of my career and how long I've been tuning, different stuff piques my interest. And it's not even super high horsepower cars. I had, I think it was a Honda Fit. And his goal was, I think, to break 100 horsepower. That was his goal.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm sitting in this car, and man, if you would have came up to me that day, you would have thought that I was sitting in like a supercar. I was so excited, man, because I wanted to hit this goal. And he's telling me, he's like, these things don't want to make over 100. So, and keeping in mind, every dyno reads different. Ours does read about 11% lower. That doesn't mean your car made 11% horsepower. That just means it's calibrated a little bit different. I spoke to DynoJet. They said, no, you're good. You're fine. You've heard some dynos called heartbreak dynos. Ultimately, the true test is if you go to the track. If a car makes 400 horsepower here and your buddy somewhere else makes 400 horsepower, when you go to the track, you're more than likely going to put bus links on them because this dyno reads low. Going back to what you were saying, since I've tuned so many cars, it becomes like a routine and normal. So when I have a different challenge, even if it's 100 horsepower, it excites me. And, you know, I sat in that car and I got more than 100. I think I got 107, which he was blown away by. Which honestly, too, on this dyno and hearing the stories that he told me before it was on there, I was kind of shocked. You know, I'm like, I didn't think we were going to hit 100, seeing this is a low reading dyno. I think we hit 107. He was kind of blown away by it. And,
that's sick.
You know, I don't know if it was, maybe it was one of those healthy built motors on a Friday.
Yeah.
We made the power. Customer was happy. Car was good. So I was happy. But, you know, just touching back on that, a lot of people probably think, you know, when you're sitting in high horsepower cars, that makes your day. Or, you know, if you're sitting in a very expensive car. It doesn't matter if it's you know, a super high-end car or a Honda Fit that we're trying to break 100 horsepower, man. I like challenges. I like, you know, stuff being different. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with the cars I tune almost on a daily basis.
Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
And this might go into a different episode where we talk about ECUs or stuff like that. But
yeah.
Is there a difference as far as when it comes to tuning, like say on something Honda versus something like Motec versus something like like how does that all play into everything?
Usually the biggest difference is the restraints. certain programs, you said Honda, let's talk about, if you're not running Honda, you'd pretty much probably be running K-tuner. Now every tuner is different. So, ultimately if you're going to ask in like a group on Facebook, hey, what device should I get? What tuning device, Honda or K-tuner? You should ultimately call your tuner and ask him. That should be your first thing. You shouldn't be on a random group in Facebook asking random strangers, because then those random strangers think they know what they're talking about, and in reality, they don't. And they're telling you stuff that, well, this program's not as bad. It's not as good as that, but it'll get you by and be cheaper. Well, number one, did you talk to your tuner? Number two, if you're on, there's certain programs that the tunes are actually cheaper in a sense, because those programs are easier to tune with. They have different features and options that make tuning a lot easier in a sense. So as far as that goes, and then you talked about Motec. Motec's a standalone. So the biggest difference between...
Yeah, I don't know the major difference between all those.
The big difference between, like, you got Motec, AEM, Haltech. The big difference between them is what they're capable of doing. Haltech right now is on the up and up with the development that they're doing and the stuff that you can do and integrate. You got some other standalones that are very, we'll talk about Megasquirt. I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with Megasquirt, but could it be better in a sense? Oh, 100%. Could they develop and change some stuff and listen to maybe tuners? Yeah, and it would make the product that much better. So, and that's the big thing too. I tune a lot of Mazda Miatas. You got two kind of big options. You got the Haltech and the Megasquirt. Megasquirt used to be really the only setup that you can throw on there. I think there's Speed Uno that works off the same software, but you're limited. Haltech not only has stepped up recently, like with their plug-and-play stuff, and we have our plug-and-play stuff as well with Haltech, the amount of development that they keep doing and changing. I could hit up our Haltech rep and say, hey man, there's a glitch in the software. They'll ask me what the glitch is. I'll recreate it. I'll show it to them. And I kid you not, within 2 weeks, it's fixed.
That's awesome.
It is.
That kind of support is great.
Oh, that's exactly it. And then there's other companies that we tell them, and they don't care. And it's like, okay, we'll look into it. No, you're not going to look into it.
Yeah.
And that's why, too, some guys really have hard feelings about certain companies. I won't name names in that aspect, but there's some guys that specifically hate such and such tuning company because of that stuff. But I'll almost say, because those tuning companies, the customer service is like next to none.
Yeah.
Besides Haltech having amazing customer service, I'm not getting paid by them. I don't get anything kickback. You compare Haltech, which if you're watching this video and Haltech's open, call them up and ask them a question, because you're not only, everybody that works there is also a tech, so they know what they're talking about.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, now you try to call up, let's say, I've been on the phone with Megasquirt or, DIY, whatever you want to call them, don't hold me to that too. I understand that the two differences. But it's like, hey, you got to email us. Okay, I'll email you the problem. And then when they finally get back to you, they're already telling you stuff that you already tried. And it is, I get it. It's different when you have a tuner, and it's different when you have a guy in your home garage, but they should know that I'm a tuner in a sense, because I'm a dealer of them. That's their homework. So don't say email me, and then when the email back I get is, hey, this wasn't from them, but it was from another company. Hey, did you make sure the car was on before you did it? And it's like, are you we're having an issue with the device here. It's not wanting to upload. Did you make sure the car was on? It's like, who do you, I'm not saying who you think you're talking about. I'm very humble. But if you think I didn't try to turn the key on and cycle the car, but now what people are forgetting is now you're wasting another day or two.
Yeah.
You waited to get that email back. You got the email back, and now it's just garbage in the email. So now you send them another email. You're hoping for the best. We're going back and talking about Megasquirt. My rule of thumb is if you put your car on Megasquirt and it doesn't start, I won't touch it. Because the amount to troubleshoot that and or have the help from them, it's not there.
Wow.
It's not there.
Wow.
And as I said too, and I don't badmouth people. If somebody working there were to watch this, I would hope that they would reach out and say, hey man, what problem did you have? Let's try to better ourselves. Because if you better that side of stuff, I would love to be able to say for every tuning brand, you know, Honda, K-Tuner, AEM, Haltech, I'm going to lump them all together so you specifically don't know what I'm talking about. I would like for them to be all on the same page with the customer support. And honestly, right now, the only company that's really at that level would be Haltech, hands down.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, that's a company or a tuner that I would choose then, knowing that, and that comes back to, you know, buying products from you, from RCautoworks, knowing that you've got that real technician support, and it's not just
that's exactly it.
Not just some random high schooler that has a knowledge base in front of them and they talk like a bot.
Or a salesman.
Or a salesman.
You know, some of these guys, some of these guys, you know, you have to email them because they don't have enough support on the technical side of stuff. And that's the other thing too, why I tell people, you know, we talked about it, I think in episode 1, you buy from me, you might spend a little bit more money, but you're getting the support.
Yeah.
You're getting, if you have a question on something, I'm not saying you're going to call up here and instantly get a hold of me because I'm busy. I will call you back if you can't get a hold of me right then and there. And I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to see what's happening. I'm going to try to troubleshoot it myself. And if I can't, I'm going to send you in the direction where you should go, which ultimately, I actually just got a compliment on that from Haltech where they said, we don't get many people calling from we don't get many customers of yours calling us because you're always taking care of the problem that they have. And that's the thing too, either whether I'm dyno tuning or we're sending out Haltech products, which we sell the adapters, so we make our own harnesses here.
That's so cool, by the way.
Even when you get it in your house, weeks later or whatever, if you call me up and you have an issue, I call people family. You're still part of that family. You can call me up 2 weeks later, you can call me 3 months later with the problem, and I'm gonna try to help you out because you supported me, so now it's time to support you. You know, and it doesn't matter if the car's in front of me, if the car is states away, if you're in a different country. You know, it's what I said, man. It's just helping your fellow man out, and that's ultimately too the keys to success.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I think that was about everything that I wanted to cover on dyno tuning and stuff. I mean, we covered a ton of stuff.
We did.
I mean, I'm here learning just as much as, you know, any other viewer would be. So this is super awesome to me.
There you go. You're learning some stuff, and I'm teaching you, so perfect. Perfect.
We appreciate you guys watching.
Most definitely.
If you haven't yet, subscribe, share with your friends, go ahead and like it. Anything else you want to say?
You know, there's going to be stuff because we're in our second episode here now, and I'm already, you know, hey, I wanted to talk about this. So we're probably going to do follow-up, you know, podcasts and stuff like that. You know, one of the biggest things too that I said in here, and you know, I'll kind of make it easy. Just because somebody has a laptop doesn't make them a tuner. It's becoming a lot worse nowadays, where people can fake it. People can act like they know what they're doing, and they make that money, and then they ultimately leave you high and dry. Do your research. Do your homework. Don't be scared to reach out to us and ask us questions. You know, we get a lot of guys, you know, that are very entry level, and hey, man, I'm scared. You know, we're here for you, man. I remember how that was when I got into this, and how people treated me because I drove a certain car. So besides, as he said, like and subscribe because it helps the channel. Share it up, please. Comment. That all helps. And the more you guys help us, the more the channel is going to keep growing. More we can keep doing videos, and you know, maybe upgrade to a bigger place here.
Make it look a little bit nicer.
We're running out of room here, and if we want another person to join us, it's going to be a little tight in this area. So, but for real, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you.